By the end of this video, you're going to know why the Middle East's borders guarantee wars forever. Most people think borders are the sole cause of conflict, but that's actually a lie. It's got a lot more to do with the political manipulation and ethnic divides, but we'll get more into that later. Before I tell you the truth about why there will never be peace in the Middle East, make sure to smash the subscribe button if you love history videos. I upload a new one every week, and you won't want to miss the next. Let's start at the beginning, with the creation of these borders. Part 1. The legacy of colonialism. In the early 20th century, as the Ottoman Empire was crumbling, great powers of the day, Britain and France, decided it was their right to carve up the Middle East. This was famously solidified in the Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916. These borders, drawn with little regard for the ethnic, tribal, and religious realities on the ground, laid down a foundation for future strife. Imagine a world where New York and New Jersey suddenly had to act as one state, despite all their differences magnified tenfold. These arbitrary lines created states that grouped incompatible groups together or split cohesive groups apart. This has been a source of internal and cross-border conflicts ever since. The Sykes-Picot Agreement and similar treaties ignored centuries of cultural, social, and economic ties that bound certain regions together while separating others that had long-standing historical animosities. The colonial powers were primarily interested in their own strategic interests, with little regard for the people living there. They wanted to secure trade routes, control resources, and establish spheres of influence. This short-sighted approach created countries that were politically and socially unstable from the outset. The division of the Middle East into artificial states set the stage for future leaders to struggle with the challenges of nation-building amidst diversity. The absence of coherent national identities meant that loyalty to the state was often secondary to ethnic, tribal, or religious affiliations, further complicating governance and fostering conflict. Part 2. Ethnic and sectarian divides. The Middle East is a mosaic of ethnicities and religions. From Kurds to Arabs, from Sunnis to Shiites, these groups often have distinct identities and historical grievances. For example, the Kurds are split across 4 countries and have been fighting for recognition and rights for decades. The region's borders cut through ethnic and sectarian lines, creating states with deep internal divisions. Unfortunately, these borders have often forced these diverse groups to compete for power and resources within the confines of new state structures, leading to a cycle of repression, rebellion, and conflict. The diversity within these countries is not merely a matter of different cultures, but also of differing visions for governance, justice, and society. In Iraq, for instance, the Sunni, Shia, and Kurdish populations have often found themselves at odds, each group vying for control and influence. In Syria, the Alawite minority has maintained a grip on power, often at the expense of the Sunni majority. These internal divisions are not just political, but are deeply rooted in historical and social contexts. The competition for dominance among these groups often leads to alliances with external powers, further complicating the situation. For instance, the support of Iran for Shia groups and of Saudi Arabia for Sunni factions adds layers to the conflicts, making them not just internal disputes, but part of a broader regional struggle. Part 3. Political manipulation and authoritarianism. In many of these artificially created states, ruling elites have maintained power by exploiting ethnic and sectarian divisions. This divide and rule tactic ensures that no single group becomes powerful enough to challenge the status quo, perpetuating a cycle of division and conflict. Leaders often use patronage networks to maintain their grip on power, favoring certain groups over others. Authoritarian regimes have further exacerbated these divisions, using heavy-handed tactics to suppress dissent and maintain control. The result is often brutal crackdowns on opposition and the stoking of intergroup tensions to distract from their own failings. Countries like Syria under Assad or Iraq under Saddam Hussein exemplified how authoritarian rulers use fear, violence, and favoritism to keep power. The suppression of political freedoms and the use of state resources to reward loyalists create an environment where grievances fester and can explode into violence. The manipulation of ethnic and sectarian identities by these regimes can lead to deep-seated mistrust among communities. When governments fall, as we saw in Iraq in 2003 or Libya in 2011, these divisions often lead to chaos and civil war as groups vie to fill the power vacuum. Part 4. Resource distribution conflicts in the Middle East are also intensified by the distribution of resources. Oil, water, and fertile land are not spread evenly. Control over these resources can make or break nations. The struggle for these resources often falls along those contentious borders. Areas rich in resources find themselves the envy and target of neighbors and even powerful international actors, fueling continuous disputes. For instance, the control of oil fields in Iraq and Syria has been a major factor in the conflicts involving ISIS and other militant groups. Water resources, particularly the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, are also points of contention. Countries like Turkey, Syria, and Iraq have had disputes over water usage and dam projects, impacting millions of people downstream. Access to water is a critical issue in the region, where arid climates make water a precious commodity. The inequitable distribution of resources often exacerbates existing ethnic and sectarian tensions. Regions that feel marginalized or deprived of their fair share of resources are more likely to rebel against central authorities, seeking autonomy or independence. Part 5. External interference. The geopolitical importance of the Middle East has attracted external powers, each pushing their own agendas. Whether it's Cold War-era interventions or modern-day involvements in Syria and Iraq, external forces have often deepened existing conflicts or sparked new ones. The interests of global powers like the US, Russia, and European countries often clash, creating a complex web of alliances and hostilities. This interference has rarely been about helping the region. More often, it's about controlling resources or geopolitical advantages. For instance, the US involvement in Iraq was as much about oil and regional influence as it was about removing a dictator. Russia's support for Assad in Syria is partly to maintain its naval base in the Mediterranean. The interventions by these external powers often have unintended consequences, such as the rise of militant groups or prolonged civil wars. The arming of various factions by different countries leads to an escalation of violence and makes finding a peaceful resolution even more challenging. The legacy of colonialism, combined with modern-day geopolitical maneuvers, has created a situation where local conflicts are often proxies for larger international struggles. This dynamic complicates peace efforts, as any resolution must address not only local grievances, but also the strategic interests of powerful external actors. Part 6. Socio-economic challenges. High unemployment, poor infrastructure, and limited access to essential services contribute to unrest and conflict. These socio-economic challenges are often worse in border areas, where government presence can be weak. The lack of opportunities and basic services can drive people towards radicalization or criminal activities. Desperation can lead people to support militant groups or uprisings, hoping for a change, any change. In many parts of the Middle East, joining a militant group can seem like the only viable option for young men facing bleak economic prospects. Countries like Yemen and Lebanon are examples where economic collapse has fueled conflict. In Yemen, the ongoing civil war has created one of the world's worst humanitarian crises, with millions facing starvation. In Lebanon, the economic meltdown has led to widespread protests and a collapse of basic services. The socio-economic challenges are intertwined with the political and sectarian issues, creating a vicious cycle. Poor governance and corruption exacerbate economic woes, leading to more discontent and instability. Breaking this cycle requires comprehensive solutions that address both the economic and political dimensions of the crisis. Part 7. Resilience of historical boundaries. Despite decades of conflict and international debates on redrawing borders, there is a strong resistance to changing the existing national boundaries. The fear of unforeseen consequences, such as new disputes or potential ethnic cleansings, has made both local powers and the international community cautious. This resilience in historical boundaries further complicates efforts towards peace and stability. The existing borders, flawed as they may be, have become a part of the international order. Changing them could lead to even greater instability, as seen in the Balkans in the 1990s. The principle of territorial integrity is a cornerstone of international law, and altering borders can set a dangerous precedent. Local leaders also fear that redrawing borders could weaken their own power and lead to loss of territory. For example, Turkey is adamantly opposed to any moves that might lead to an independent Kurdish state, which it fears would inspire its own Kurdish population to seek independence. The resilience of historical boundaries is a testament to the complexity of the Middle East's geopolitical landscape. Efforts to change these borders, whether through negotiation or conflict, often lead to unintended and potentially catastrophic consequences. Now that you know the truth about the Middle East's borders, you should watch this video about Napoleon and his rise to fame. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating insights into the world of history.